Hello there, it's me, Sari here from Sari'S Stamping Studio, and now I'm here to give you a quick browse through a couple of pages that I've started working on. And in this book I'm just trying to keep it sort of real. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, it's just a trial and error book where I try my ideas, different products and perhaps even different techniques. So let's get started. Here's a page where I have done a bit of I used a tissue paper in the background and I just glued it down, and then I believe I covered it all with a thin coat of white gesso. Then I started stamping a little bit here and there, added on some tissue tape, some string and even some cheesecloth, and I put this man here from Tim Holtz. It's a already die cut piece, and here we are basically. And a head full of fears has no space for dreams, and that's what I'm sort of keeping as my guide in this book. So I'm not going to be afraid of trying things out. So here is something that I did try out. This was my first thing, and I started off putting notes in the background of what I've done. So in this case I've had a distress oxide background and a little bit of water, as well as some Nouveau embellishment mousse through a stencil. You can see the small dots there, they are in a silvery color, as well as a little bit of stamping. And I'm sort of hesitant when it comes to stamping directly into the book, especially when it has got some bulky things underneath. So that's why I'm just trying to keep things on one page, and then I can have my journaling bits or just remembering bits on this side. And recently I've even started making just separate pages and just gluing them down here, so I can sort of afford having a fail here and there and not put it in there if I don't want to. So all you see already, I went away from my let's not get afraid bit, but still I'm here. I'm still trying things out. So when it comes to this bit, this is something that I did, I'm sure, a year ago or something. And I did make a background with some distress ink on paper, and spread some water on it, and then I had some stencils and distress ink. It was actually distress oxide ink, and then I did some ghosting with a little bit of watery effects, and I did some stamping and such. So I just tried different things out. And the glimmering bits here, I did use some sort of a glue, a stencil and a golden foil, which I actually was able to get to stick to the surface there. And in this one I did put a texture of a texture paste of sorts. It's a graphite texture paste from Finnabair, and then I just put this tag on, which I had made before. Just didn't know what to do with it, but sort of it works there. And here I tried some stamps out, and I actually did make the background with some pigment powder from Prima Memory Hardware. And I sort of feel like it was a sort of a dry product, so I'm not sure if I feel successful with that or not. And then I did some stamping with red ink. And I used a stencil and some really thick texture paste, because you can really feel the texture of it. It's a nice and touchy-feely thingy there. And I also had, it says Vintage Ivory Hardware Powder. I'm sorry, I'm not struggling to see where I've put it actually. Perhaps it was in the colours, it was a creamy colour perhaps. Vintage ivory is sort of a light colour, isn't it? So that's what I have here. And well, I did some stamping with black ink and a couple of stamps there as well. And here is a little bit more, a page that I'm more satisfied with really. So what I did was the leftovers of some texture paste through a stencil. And then I did some spraying with distress ink. And then I had this watercolor colored butterfly, and I just put a stamp there and a saying. So this is a really basic, easy peasy page to do in my book. I mean, this is sort of easy, and I like the way the texture actually pops through the colors. And this is also something that I made at least a year ago. And I just had some Distress Oxide ink through a couple of stencils. And I used some stamps from 49 and Market, as well as Liane Creative. And the washi tape comes from Dina Wakley. So it was a trial and error page here. But this is something that I made this weekend. And I actually started off using Dina Wakley's small acrylic paint bottles. Here they are. They are really small in size, and the nozzle or the nib is really small, so you can really make sure that you're getting a small amount of ink or paint. And I put here some yellow and orange, and then I just used a silicone brush to strike it out. I'm not sure if that's the correct term, but I use this because this is an easy cleanup brush, and I just dragged it on like this, and I really wanted the color of the paper to show through, so I didn't want it to cover the background as a whole. And acrylic paint has a tendency to dry fairly quickly, so that's what it did. And then I used a stencil from Studio Light. It's a grunge stencil, and I'm sorry I can't reach it right now, but you can see it there. So I used some Wild Honey Distress ink with a blending tool, and I really rubbed that one there. And then I started stamping with VersaFine ink. And VersaFine ink is an ink that takes a little bit longer to dry, but it has a really nice black color, and it's one of my favorites inks actually. But when it comes to working with this, you ought to do a bit of drying in between the layers. So I used some texture stamps from Caramel Studio here and there, and these honeycomb bits here are from Gummi Up, and it's a lovely stamp, I think. So if you want things to not fade or react with water, even though the VersaFine inks shouldn't react with water because they are the inks I use when I do my watercoloring, it still seems like there's been some smudging. So I'm not really sure what that has to do, why that is. It must be that I've sort of accidentally touched it when it was still a little bit wet. And the Bumblebee stamp also comes from Gummiopan. It's a new release for this spring, and I just put that statement there, believe in yourself, and it could also have been believe in yourself, but it's not a bee, so perhaps it shouldn't have been anyway. But there it is. And I also did I diluted some white gesso, splattered it here and there, so I got some white splotches here and there. They actually come through pretty well in this video. So, and then I went on with this beautiful cat stamp from Caramel Studio that Birgit Korpsen has drawn. And I stamped it on a separate piece of paper. It wasn't watercolor paper, so I couldn't really get the shading or anything perfect, even though I even can't do that from the get-go. But still, I wanted it to keep it like this, and I wanted a green background, so I did use a couple of stencils and some distress inks in various green colors or hues, and I just put them on there, did a bit of black ink stamping just to have a nice background. And I also wanted to keep the busyness just like here, so I also had some sort of whiteness even though the paper isn't white. It's just something that isn't that busy. And I wanted to give you a heads up on these stamp sets. I like these a lot because they are perfect when it comes to do some art journal stamping, in my book anyway. I used those triangles there as well as those plus signs. When it comes to this grid pattern, I could have gone for that one, but I did use something from the Studio Lights Grunge series. It's a lovely, I like that sort of grid pattern texture. But you can see that you can have a lot of fun things going on with both stencils and stamps. So that's where we are right now. And then I wanted to do something with this cat that is licking his mouth. And what does cats like? Well, they like fish, don't they? So I just wanted to make something fun with this. And the fish stamps come from a set from Kaisercraft, okay, it's a craft. And I just wanted to do a sort of a scene where the cat is looking at an aquarium or something similar. So I drew this sort of frame, I put the cat there, stamped the cat first, made a mask for it out of just regular thin printing paper. Then I stamped the coral bits here using a mask sheet so it wouldn't go outside the lines. And then I stamped the fish on a separate piece of paper, colored them with watercolors, or actually distress ink. Put them on some thin 3D foam tapes and just stamped and colored away and had some fun with this. So it's an easy peasy thing, but it's sort of fun anyway. And then I actually was inspired by TesaPysslar. You can find her on Instagram. I'm sure I can make her, put her name in the description box so you can find her there. So she isn't big on Facebook or anything like that, but Instagram is her sort of social network place. And she and her friend actually are making these really fun looking colored backgrounds with acrylic paints, for example. And you could just put your finger there and rub it off, or you could just use a brush, as I did with this silicone brush. I did actually want this one. And you can have gloves on if you want to, of course. So what you do first, you just put on a lovely background with different colors, and then you start stamping. And finally you can have some white details with a white pen. And I actually used, let's see if I can find my pen. I don't seem to have it here. I actually do. It's not this one is black, but it's a pen from Posca, Uni Posca. It's a white pen and the nib is 0.7 millimeters. So that's what I used and was able to make it pop against the background there. So, I mean, it's fun to make this, and I think that this technique could be called the bandana stamping technique. I did a couple of trial and errors back in the days, but it's fun to just go back and experience things. And here I made a distress ink background, splattered on some water, took off the excess, and did my collage stamping technique here. And I actually was inspired by this stamp set from Deep Red Cling Stamps. I wanted the text and the light bulb as well, so just cut them apart. So I was able to put the text in the middle and do some collage stamping, and I started off with those two, and then I just chose a couple of stamps from here and there. The dots here and the messy bits are from a set of from Creative Expressions, which I actually found on that scrap event there, or the mixed media event. So it was a set of colors that I usually don't mix. I'm not that much into pink or purple, but sort of it looks sort of colorful and happy. And this is something that I just tried out. I had seen a video on YouTube, but somebody had put on lots of colors, and then I think it was something with fish. They just drew a couple of fish there and painted everything around the fish black, so they could sort of, the busy background could actually emerge because they had put a mask on it somehow. So I actually put a circle mask here and just dragged on some black ink. I didn't paint it this time. And then I, by accident, had some left over. Could it be gesso or some texture paste or something that was popping through? So it's sort of visible, it's sort of a greyish tone. You can see it here and there, let's say. And then I used a white pen just to mark it off a little, just to sort of keep it cohesive with the small bits and pieces of pink here. And then I also added on some strokes of pink ink here. So it's not that perfect page, but it works. And then I also tried the white pen from Posca. You can see that it actually stands out on a black surface. But I think that one of the many rules when it comes to using pens and markers is that make sure that the ink or the paint or whatever you have used is really, really dry. Diary says that, I mean, inks or paints actually could take up to 12 hours to dry, so just leave it until the next day so you don't ruin the nibs. And let's see, here I've got something else. I used this same honeycomb stencil that I used here. You can see it faintly there, but I used some white crackle paste and I let it self-dry. So you can really see the nice crackling effect there. That's what I went for. So this is also something that I've actually been inspired by looking at a video from at YouTube. And I painted with some gesso here, only here. And then I used these acrylic paints, just put on a dabber there, sprayed some water, and I helped it out with my brush. And if I got too much paint here, I just put it and took it away with some paper. And then I continued my process. So I've got some sort of purple and blue here, but even some grayish thing in the background there. And then I just did some stamping with some numbers. It's one of the stamps in a grunge set from Studio Light. And I also fastened this one with a stapler, the tiny attacher stapler from Tim Holtz. And also this metallic wire, which I got from one of the mixed media classes I went to with Olga from 13 Arts. And I really love the texture it gives. I mean, if you could also go for some thread, of course, but I think that this one is more vivid. I mean, it's organic. It doesn't stay in its place. I actually just fasten it with some staplings there as well. And then you can see that I have some washi tape here there as well. And then I used an already die-cut piece from Tim Holtz. It's a set of a lot of these botanical themed decorations. Let's see if I have it here. I'm not sure if I have. But you know, I'm sure you know what I mean. Here we are. So I put them in a box, in a case like this. And there's a lot of images that you can use and work with when it comes to these art journal things and bits. And then I used one of the sayings from one of the many sticker books that Tim Holtz has. And I think that I've used this small talk mini quote book in this case. So I'm actually pretty pleased with this one. It's nice to go on YouTube and just see what you can do and try to mimic it really. Here is something else. I've also gone for some vintage paper dolls from Tim Holtz, as well as the butterfly from this set. So I've actually used both of these sets. And in this case I put on some masking tape. I also covered a bit of sturdy bit of paper with some tissue paper. I added on some extra glue because it doesn't have the best glue or tape in between, in the background. There's also this film strip thingy there, so I actually had these sort of here and there, covered it all with some white gesso just to tone it down a little bit. And then I made a thingy there, also using that metal wire, so I definitely need to get more of this. I love it. And then I used another quote from another sticker set that looks like this. So there are 4 different kinds of sheets. There are 2 black backgrounds and 2 white backgrounds with either gold or silver print. And since this page was sort of light, I thought that I'd keep it in that way with that light quote like that. So let's see. I don't think I actually had the time to do anything more, but I think that it was a productive weekend. And I'm happy to go about this, and I want to continue. I just wish I had more time to do it right now, but that's where I'm at right now. So just don't be frightened to try things out. Get yourself an art journal and start creating. It's really, really fun, I must say. I'm going to sign off right now. I hope you have a good time. Bye-bye.